Thank you, Justin. You've got a very Anglo-American crowd here, so you know the whole phrase, you say tomato, we say tomato, you say potato, we say potato, you say Cockburn, we actually say Coburn. It's just a chorus that was left out of the song. We're here to celebrate an extraordinary book and an extraordinary man, and in keeping with the spirit of Alexander, I hope that the crowd who were at the memorial last year will forgive me if I begin the way that I began then, which is recalling what you would hear every morning if Alexander stayed with you in your home. You would be barely awake, bleary at the crack of dawn, thinking of all the things that lay before you, tasks and trials and tribulations for the day. And you would hear, not from the bed in the guest room, because Alexander didn't really like sleeping in guest room beds. He much preferred lying out on the couch in the living room. You would hear rising from the living room a voice, an unmistakable voice saying, "So, are you ready to greet the day with unbridled optimism?" And I think we should all just meet him in that chorus right now. Are we ready to greet the day with unbridled optimism? Yeah. Fair enough. I want to thank powerHouse Arena, Verso Books for putting out such a gorgeous book, all those who helped in the pulling together of this book. We'll hear more about the process in just a minute. And also thanks C-SPAN, who interviewed Alexander in a wonderful feature that I'm sure they will make available for people who want to see it. And before I forget, I'm sure that we will be remembering throughout this evening the extraordinary newsletter that Alexander co-founded, now edited by Jeffrey St. Clair, Counterpunch. And you can find it at counterpunch.org, and I'm sure C-SPAN will be kind enough to run that in the lower third underneath at least a few times in the next hour, right? This is a gathering of friends of Alexander. Any foes? Damn it. He would have enjoyed that. On the platform here, you have a niece of Alexander's, a brother of Alexander's, and the daughter of Alexander. We lost him a year ago, barely. It seems like both way too long ago and no time at all. We, all of us, have different personal stories as well as professional stories to share. I think this evening you're going to hear a little bit of both. The book that we're talking about, is A Colossal Wreck, a road trip through political scandal, corruption, and American culture. You'll hear a little bit about Alexander's fondness for road trips, his enduring quest, not really to get through political scandal and corruption, but to reveal it, and his real love affair with American culture, which comes through strongly in the pages of this book. A little background, just so you know, the book is coming out now. You just heard that he died a year ago. He was working on this book pretty much until the day that he died. And it was pieced together, partly thanks to the process that he and Jeffrey had developed at Counterpunch, where every year, at the end of the year, they would publish a greatest hits column of their pieces over the preceding 12 months. And this had enabled Alexander to keep a pretty good track on his favorite parts of his own oeuvre, as they say in England. And the book was then put together with extraordinary help from Daisy, from Jeffrey, from Andrew, in between feeding his animals, responding to the crisis of the day, talking to Percy, his cockatiel on his shoulder, and talking to anybody else in the community of Petrolia where he lived who might need his help or assistance or advice on repairing their vintage vehicle. Alexander pulled together A Colossal Wreck, as well as a wonderful collection of articles about words that should be forever banished. You can find all the information at counterpunch.org. And I'll just say that this book is pretty much as he wanted it. Daisy can attest. I'm incredibly glad it's out here. It reminds us that Alexander, while he hated cliches, he did very much live up to the one about comforting the afflicted and afflicting the comfortable. You'll hear a lot about afflicting the comfortable, but I just want to share a little bit of his comfort for the afflicted. He had an incredibly reliable ability to stand up for the underdog and defend those who were powerless in our media culture and in our society, and sum up the imbalance of power very perfectly. Workers, for example. On February 28th, 1996, he wrote, "The love of our newspapers for free trade surely has something to do with the fact that although there has been fearsome attrition in the journalistic profession, at least the lost jobs here aren't reappearing south of the border at a fraction of the cost. The day that column writing is subcontracted to high school students in Guatemala, I expect to see a turnaround on the trade issue among the opinion-forming classes." He stood up for young people, May 22nd of the same year. "The hysteria about teen violence is more than matched by the alarms about a pubescent rutting boom, with children having children, and children giving one another AIDS. Bill and Hillary seldom stop sermonizing on this. Adults listen agog to the boastful lies of teenage boys and then rush to judgment. In 1970, 20% of boys and 4% of girls in junior high schools claimed on self-reporting surveys to have had sex. In 1992, the figure had risen to 27% of boys and 20% of girls. And if rising legions of pubescents were sexually active, how come the pregnancy rate among 10 to 14-year-olds hasn't simply similarly skyrocketed? In 1976, 3.2 babies, abortions, and miscarriages per 100 junior high school girls. In 1988, 3.3. Amid this supposed junior high sexual revolution, 98% of girls arrived at age 15 without ever having been pregnant. Junior high school students must be America's most skilled condom deployers. 7th graders should be enlisted to hold seminars for US grown-ups who sport the industrial world's highest rates of unplanned pregnancy. And finally, standing up for animals in a charming piece about the Democratic Convention and how conventions in general like to, Republican and Democratic, like to set up in tourist attraction towns. He talked about the Republican convention in San Diego, and somehow the story of the convention merged with his story of SeaWorld, which is part of the landscape there. SeaWorld, owned by the Anheuser-Busch Corporation and host to about 4 million visitors a year, same as the zoo, was a favored venue for convention events, nourished by the kitsch atmospherics of Purity and La Mer, with dolphins and orca recruited with behavioral techniques to exhibit the fundamental harmony of creation under corporate auspices. SeaWorld is non-union, with minimum wage levels for the attendants. At least the zoo is Teamster organized, though there should be more interspecies union work. Why leave it all to the human society? In the polar bear exhibit, a big new pool with enhanced underwater availability, 3 of the bears had salmonella poisoning and were confined to what the guide brightly termed their bedrooms. This meant compulsory overtime for 18-month-old Chinook, who was putting in 13-hour days. I thought Chinook looked frayed and angry when I saw him, but the guide insisted the cub was doing a, quote, real good job in exhibiting polar bearishness to the audience. Chinook could do with a union rep, same way poor Dunder the elephant needed one a few years back when it was discovered she was being savagely beaten for disciplinary infractions. Don't snarl, organize. Every now and again, orangutans organize an intifada. The last was in 1990 when the Bornean apes carefully built up reserves of rocks and caused $570,000 worth of damage to the 1.5-inch glass. Alexander is going to be recalled here by Andrew Cockburn, who is not only Alexander's youngest brother, but Washington editor of Harper's Magazine and the author most recently of Rumsfeld, Rise, Fall, and Catastrophic Legacy, his Rise, Fall, and Catastrophic Legacy. Also by Doug Henwood, who is the publisher of the Left Business Observer, by Connor Kilpatrick, editor at Jacobin Magazine, a contributor to many others besides. Daisy Cockburn will follow up, and we will take just a few questions But if you really want to get close to any of us and ask us any really personal family questions, you have to have a purchased book in hand.